Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dichotomy Diaries. I'm your host, Amanda Arnier, and today we have a very special guest. We have Vanessa Reiser with us today. Vanessa, thank you for being here. And
Thank you so
why don't
much.
we start with you just telling the listeners a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your background, kind of that kind of stuff.
Sure. So, my name is Vanessa Reiser. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I specialize in narcissistic abuse. I'm licensed in New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Florida. I grew up in New York, so Rockland County, which is about 20 miles north of the city in the Hudson Valley. Born in Westchester, but raised in Rockland County. It was an interesting childhood. My parents were kind of like hippies, so I had to kind of figure out a lot of stuff on my own. A little bit of like a ragamuffin Irish kid with, no shoes, flitting about with the artist mother. And sort of had to raise my brothers, a lot of adversity. There were days where there was no heat, no food, stuff like that. So kind of had to manage that. And I think that's probably why I decided to be a social worker, is because I became very connected to social issues and have a very strong advocacy mind. And so I think that adversity does catapult people into the social work realm. But that was very kind of much my experience was sort of this, adversity, having a lot of trials and tribulations and falling quite a bit. I didn't attend college until I was well into my 30s, and graduated with my master's at 42. So very much kind of like a late bloomer.
Congratulations. That no matter when you get it done, it's still done.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I started following you. Gosh, I can't. It was probably like a month or two ago, and I believe that I had found your page off of Dr. Nadine's page. It was one of the ones that was recommended to me from her. And I was like, wow, like, I really like your content. And I saw that your post and you're like, I want to get on some podcasts. So I'm glad that you're here. Um, I think that maybe the algorithm brought us to each other. And I don't know how much you know about my podcast. Have you listened to any of it or like summarized or anything like that?
No, I'm kind of new to this world in that I've just finished writing this book. And so the
Yeah.
last year and a half, I've just had my head in my laptop. And I couldn't even really create my own content, let alone listen to books. And people are always telling me about brilliant podcasts and other things to listen to. And I just, for the last year and a half, have been so enveloped in my own book that I'm still actually editing, and it's been a lot of work. So yeah, it's been hard for me to find time to do much of anything.
I when I first started this journey, it was probably like let's say 18 months ago, give or take. The first thing that I thought, because I love to write, was that I wanted to write a book. And I knew that with how detailed my story was, that writing it all out was going to take a really long time, as you know. And so I opted, I'm like, you know what, I could transcribe it. If I'm going to transcribe it, I might as well just like put it in a podcast format and then I can use those transcriptions, to help me along the way. So I admire you for doing that because it is a huge feat to completely like engulf yourself in something like that, especially something that is so deeply rooted in like our psyche and in our soul, that means so much to us. So um when is your book coming out? What is the title of your book? What Tell us a little bit about that.
It comes out October 29th. It was picked up by Hachette, which I'm really proud of. So that's exciting. It's one of the top four publishing companies, which I really never thought would happen. And I'm so blessed. It's called Narcissistic Abuse, a therapist's guide to escaping, identifying, escaping, and healing from toxic and manipulative people. And you can find it on Amazon.com for pre order already. Or Hachette also has a link where you can purchase the book for pre-order.
Amazing, amazing. Um, so I think that that's a the thing we share in common. I talk about narcissistic abuse, emotional manipulation, financial abuse, all of those kind of things. And before, I would say 18 months ago, I was like completely unaware that it was even really a thing. I thought that people could be narcissistic. They like to look at themselves in the mirror, but I didn't realize that it was a mental health disorder that was in the DSM-5. I had no idea. And oddly enough, as soon as I started dealing with the final abandonment of my ex-husband, it was like when it was going very mainstream on social media. Everything I saw was talking about narcissistic abuse and, the keywords, gaslighting, future faking, all of the things which now I think sometimes are overused a little bit. Because everybody wants to be a therapist and diagnose people. But I think that that's a commonality that we share. So I really wanted to kind of talk about that today and just like ask some questions because you're a professional. We haven't had anybody who's a professional on the show yet. And throughout season one, I share to kind of give you a very brief synopsis. I was married to a man that was outwardly Mormon, that convinced me to convert religions. We got married, and I found out that he was a very, very serious degenerate gambler as well as a sex worker for men.
Wow.
Um, it was kind of a perpetual cycle of sex work feeds the gambling, we're broke, kind of that thing. What I didn't know was that this was habitual, that there were 16 other me's. And so once I started asking all the questions last summer, I uncovered a lot of them. And so season one of the podcast really is my story and the story of about 6 other women who went through almost exactly the same thing.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And so the first thing that I want to ask you, because I think it's kind of like the most obvious question. So when I was looking up just a little background on you, I saw that it said that you're an expert in narcissistic abuse. And I also saw that it said something about cult abuse. Is that accurate? Are
Yes,
those are those two things, um, do they kind of come hand in hand, do you see?
they are exactly the same.
In what way?
So when you are in a relationship with a narcissist, you are in a cult of one. Every
Mhm.
cult is led by a narcissist, a sociopath, or a psychopath. So you're either in a cult of one, a cult of two, a cult of five, a cult of 500, a cult of 5 million. We see people using mind control and highly manipulative tactics to coercively control family systems, which are can be considered a cult in terms of
Mhm.
your neighbors might have a very cultish family. So we see this in different ways, but generally you are in a cult of one or many.
Okay. I remember when I was kind of letting the world know that I was engaged and I was going to be married, and it was to a Mormon man. I would say that 80% or more of my support, what they immediately had some sort of negative reaction. And since I've had the podcast and there's 150 listeners of each episode and everything, I I have gotten so many messages about individuals with Mormon partners that have narcissistic tendencies. Um, do you think that that has anything to do with the fact that Mormonism and LDS kind of like teaches you that they're, like the cream of the crop, the pristine, we have to have multiple people that we mission into, shepherd into our religion, so that, do you think that has anything to do with that?
Well, I think what happens in a lot of these religious environments is that the religion itself is not the problem. However, the environment primes you for servitude. And in that servitude, the narcissist smells blood in the water. So if you go to any given church on any given Sunday, you are probably surrounded by narcissists because this is the perfect place for them to sort of cast out lines and reel in people, because they know that these people are eager to serve, that they are caring, that they are empathetic, that they are forgiving, right? Religion teaches us, please forgive, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
So all of the rhetoric that gets peppered around religion is the chef's kiss for an abusive person. So we see this in a lot of different environments, whether it's the church, the Ponzi scheme, the guru environment. There are always people sort of flitting about those environments that are particularly dangerous.
Yeah, you touched on the forgiveness factor, and I will say 100% when I found out about all of um, my ex-husband's past insurrections or a lot, the bad things, that the skeletons, I guess, for lack of a better term, um, I felt thankful that he was willing to share. I immediately was like, it doesn't matter because you're telling me, I forgive you, because if we want to be more Christ-like, like I've never been like a super, super religious person, Roman Catholic, like, but whatever, just Italian. That's what we do. Um, like, but when things started happening in the present that didn't line up with the person that he had sold to me, it was it was almost like it was an unconscious reaction for me to just immediately forgive and give him another chance. And I think that that's something that he knows. Do you think that it is an intentional no, or do you think that, and what I mean by that is, I heard somebody say one time that sociopaths are, they believe what they're doing and what they're saying, but it's like they have short-term memory loss, that they can't remember that it failed 19 times. But that a psychopath is intentional with his actions and knows exactly what he wants and how it's going to end up. Is that accurate?
Somebody who has a disordered personality who is pathological knows what they're doing. People that are just narcissistic may not realize what they're doing, and all of us have narcissistic tendencies. So some of us are pretty well intentioned and still make mistakes depending upon what's going on in our lives. Are we hungry? Are we premenstrual? You might could feel a little bit like you're being a bitch or a jerk on any given
Yeah.
day, and you may not realize the pain that you're causing. And that's what normal people do, is they make mistakes like that, then they apologize and try to course correct their behavior. But the person who has a disordered personality does know what they're doing. And I think that's a distinct difference. They like the way that they are. In their minds, they are quote unquote winning. They consider people who are vulnerable or empathetic to sort of be like almost like losers or weak. And
Weak,
they
yeah.
just they have no interest in being that person. And it works for them. They tend to be very successful. These are CEOs. They're in the C suites. They're kind of running giant, corporations. I think it's 1 out of 4 CEOs is a psychopath directly. So they do well. So they're not going to forfeit their successes just because, empathetic people want them to. So the people who are particularly disordered pathologically, they know what they're doing.
That's interesting. I remember something that was constantly said in every argument that me and my ex-husband had. I'm very emotional. I mean, one, I'm a woman, and two, I'm very empathetic, but I would get very emotional. I'd probably cry when, right off the bat. Um, and I would talk about my feelings, which is like a normal person thing to do. And he would say, I don't know why you always have to get so emotional or bring emotions into it. Emotions don't get us anywhere. You have to look at facts and logic because those things are real. always.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
It really just, I was like, okay, well, so I'm not allowed to feel, like, what facts are we talking about here? Are we talking about the fact that you ran away again, or like, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't get it. But again, like, if they think that they're winning and they think that they're right in their actions and what they do is intentional, what happens when this person is like super unsuccessful, or like in my case, like has a habitual gambling problem and is always broke or homeless?
They tend to blame everyone else. That's somebody else's fault. So they have no insight.
It's true.
They're the perpetual victim. So, um, and in their minds, they might actually, as you mentioned, be quite delusional and think that they, or convince themselves that they are successful, and hence spend a lot of their energy pulling people down below them because they want to sort of push themselves up. Their baseline tends to exist lower than ours. So they're constantly pulling people down to make themselves feel better. They have a perpetual void. They are wickedly insecure. And so that's why the fluffing of the peacock feathers becomes their thing, is to make themselves look and seem bigger than they really are, because they're really, really hollowed out, and sad and miserable creatures. So, yeah, they also confabulate, as you mentioned. They fill in the blanks with bullshit in their lives, to sort of soothe themselves. And a lot of it is, nonsensical. It is not based in reality. So it wouldn't surprise me if your ex was, kind of inflating his own ego as needed along the way to make himself be convinced that he's better than he is.
He, to give you a little bit more insight, he's a bodybuilder, full of tren, with super white veneers. Um, can't swear they're like the most chiclet fucking teeth you've ever seen.
That's great.
No, you're fine. No, you're good. Like, it's good. Um, so with his whole like sex work world that he's in, he has for 10 years done financial domination on the internet.
What
Do
is
you
that?
know what that do you know what that is? Oh my gosh. Okay. So financial domination is the relationship between two individuals, one being like the alpha and the other being like the submissive, so kind of that power dynamic. However, the submissive like gets off on giving his money to the alpha. And there's this whole world on the internet that is straight male alpha degrading, um, manipulating, mind controlling these sub gay men. Um, it gets crazy. I mean, there's things that they like. I remember hearing him on a call one day, and it was a gentleman who had paid him, and he had asked him to, with his shirt off and flexing his pecs, to wear a like a MAGA hat and to like degrade him because he was a Democrat, say like racial slurs to him, and he paid for
Oh
it.
no. Oh God.
And so when you say inflating of the ego, I mean, this man has people sending him daily like a tax that they're they have to pay because he is um better in all ways, shape, or form, the alpha and the omega.
Unbelievable. I mean, could you imagine? Like, it's giving me LDE. It is the LDEest thing I've ever heard. I mean, that is so ridiculous that you would have to make yourself feel better by putting people down. And I think it's really interesting that there's a financial piece. I could see how that would really check a lot of boxes for somebody who's disordered, because A, they have the control, and then B, there's that winning vibe of tallying. Um,
Oh,
and then he
100%.
probably gets very, very aroused in that environment based on those variables. So that, because it's checking so many boxes, it probably keys right into that sexual mind, and he's probably very aroused by that.
Yeah, it's always kind of like a debate between myself, the other ex-partners, and the listeners as to whether or not he's heterosexual, gay, bisexual, whatever. And obviously, me being having been married to him, he has a daughter, he has another ex-wife, and countless female exes. Whenever somebody says, "Oh, he's definitely gay," um, we're like, "Nah," like, there's no way. I've kind of like made this like hypothesis that I think that he's aroused by money. That anything that is a vehicle to get him to money to be able to fulfill the gambling, maybe the gambling being the nucleus, um, is what he does, is which way he'll go. Because with the findom, with like all of that stuff, it brings him money, and he knows that. He used to call it like an endless well. Um, I think females and heterosexual relationships are just another vehicle on that cycle.
I think it may have something to do with the money, but the money is really a symbol of power. And the power is what I believe is so stimulating. And I also think that the narcissist is generally what I would describe as any sexual. So this is not a diss to the pansexual community. This is very specific. They will take attention from anything. Does it have a pulse, is basically their gauge. So that's my opinion, is that they cast out a bunch of lines. Whomever bites then and feeds them that dopamine kick that they're so desperately seeking, then they're fine with that. So I think they'll take attention from any creature.
I think that that's very true, and that's a great term, asexual, because I mean that's essentially like what I've been thinking. Because again, it's never really anybody else's place to label somebody in any capacity, especially not with sexuality. But um, there's so many truths and facts in the story that everybody is always like, "Hey, we can tell. Hey, he has a lisp. We know." And I'm like, "You guys, stop! Like too much." Um, so kind of like, in your opinion, do family members of these types of individuals, um is it more often that they kind of stick their head in the sand? And I guess the question, like, why don't they warn us?
Sometimes they're indebted to the narcissist, or the narcissist has the purse strings and may even have them on their payroll. Or in the cult dynamic, they have been coerced themselves, so they don't have agency or autonomy enough to extricate themselves from that environment. So they may just steer away from that. Or additionally, they might not think that the new supply would believe them. Oftentimes, the new supply is being fed a bunch of lies about former supplies and other people involved, because the narcissist will triangulate and make people fight amongst themselves just for sport, just for chaos. So they're so adept at lying and manipulating that most of the people around them are not even really sure how to process what they're experiencing, let alone express it, share it, and protect others from what it is. But I would say more than likely it's because they are having that cult-like experience and they themselves have been coerced.
Okay, that makes sense, and seems definitely like what me and the other girls have experienced. Because it was always, if I'm sitting with the immediate past ex, she'll say something along the lines of, "I really wanted to tell you, but then I saw how happy you looked and how happy he was posting you and all of this stuff, and I thought, well, maybe I just got the bad version of him and that he had changed." And I like all of them have said that. And I think to myself, I'm like, if she would have reached out, I would have been like, Psh, I know my man. Like, you are the crazy one, because he demonized all the exes. So um yeah, it's so profound. I find myself, as I've been going on some podcasts lately as a guest as well, kind of just trying to get the brand and face out there and stuff. And obviously it's either an hour, sometimes 90 minutes, but typically like a very small amount of time. I find myself after each interview almost feeling like bad about telling my story because it's so detailed. And when I'm trying to relay it to others to understand, like, I feel like I feel dumb. Like, I feel like the question is always like, well, why wouldn't you just leave? Well, why did you choose to marry him? And the reason is in all of the tiny little things that you forget, which is part of the manipulation, I think, right?
Yeah, people are trauma bonded. So when you go through the relationship, there's the love bombing, there's the devaluing, and then there's the discard. But it repeats, and most people don't realize it's the makeup session, tension building, fallout. Makeup session, tension building, fallout. And you go through this fucking up and down. And depending upon how rapid it is, it can be really, really traumatizing to our brains. But what happens is you develop a trauma bond and you are now addicted to the makeup session. You are addicted like a proper drug addict to that love bombing stage. Please just make it right again. I don't want to be uncomfortable. Be the person that you were in the beginning. Be that loving sort of version that I really like to be around. And that's what makes us stay, is that we essentially become addicted to the dopamine from that fix when things are made to be okay. And I think people need to treat this as such, and not really throw themselves on the sword. And people around, others in this environment need to be supportive, the way you might support somebody who's trying to extricate themselves from a drug addiction, because it's no different. It's that feeling of like, please just fix it, that we get addicted to. So a lot of people have a hard time, going cold turkey. When I left the relationship, I shook for 9 days straight, like a fiend. Like I was like, make it okay. I was literally decompensating. And then I was able to slowly kind of wean myself off the drug, and days passed and I was like, okay, I'm still alive. Okay, and then time passed and I was still okay, stuff like this. But it is extremely hard. And let's not even consider the post-separation abuse, which happens because somebody who's particularly malignant, especially if you're co-parenting, will literally try to destroy your life. And I'm talking about everything from take the kids away from you, put you in jail, have you murdered, have you commit suicide. I mean, this is like very serious business, the post-separation abuse. So it's no wonder people stay. I'm shocked when they get out. I have a client recently got out and I do cartwheels every time I see her because I'm like, wait, you left? Like,
Wow.
this is so incredible. And so, the fact that people don't understand that, there's a lot of things that we don't understand, but we have to try to hold space for, being a drug addict. I've never done heroin, but I try to honor people who have gone through that and sit and listen to their story. I'm not a Black person, but I listen to people who experience systemic racism, and I'm the student, so people need to sort of really try to, reserve judgment and hold space for people if they have not walked in those shoes, because it is an addiction, and it's a powerful addiction, and it's sort of an unseen one, because at the time you really don't even know what you're going through. You feel crazy. So someone turning to you and going, why didn't you leave, just really perpetuates this feeling that you're fucking crazy. And it doesn't help anyone. It makes it worse. And so we have a lot of work to do in terms of like people really holding space and understanding what this is. But yeah, it's an addiction.
I feel like for me, I definitely was addicted to making it better. I'm self-proclaimed fixer, like for sure. Um, for me, it was a lot, staying had a lot to do also with the fact that um I think that I was addicted to making him happy momentarily. So if, because we always had money problems, and he was always just so down and out because he had lost a bunch or whatever, I found joy in like giving him like, here's $100. You shouldn't have no money in your wallet, like whatever. Um, I did that so much to like my own demise. Also, right, let's talk about the fact that the financial abuse. I mean, I think that I watched an interview that you did, where you were talking with a woman, and it was about, oh, you don't have to work. Like, is this something that they all say? Like for real? every single one of his, oh, you don't have to work. Oh, okay, I don't. But then you make me quit my really good job, and then now I have to get a worse one to support both of us.
Yeah. It's
Like,
hard to imagine that somebody would be so forward thinking that they are actually doing that in that moment to get you isolated and full stop destroy your life. And that's what's hard for people to understand. They want to control you.
mhm.
And they know how the story is going to end because they've seen it happen. It's like they kind of enjoy, that destructive piece, which actually sort of begs a question in a lot of cases that a lot of the people that I speak to are not just dealing with a narcissist, but somebody who has antisocial personality disorder or who is a sociopath, because there are often overlaps. But that really sort of is that malignant, you're kind of crossing over into this vibe around this somebody who's really that forward thinking, like this is my thing, this is my playbook, I'm going to ruin her life, and haha, you have no money now, and haha, you have no career, I'm better than you, you're unemployed, you fucking loser. And that's
Right.
that level.
And this is why I'm leaving you, because you're a broke piece of shit with no job. And you're like, you put me here, motherfucker. Like, what are you talking about? Like, and
I,
you get like in the moment though, like because you're already so broken down and beaten down and just in the most depressive hole, like you believe it about yourself. And initially for me, and I'm sure for a lot of other people, he like I was probably I was reasonably insecure when I met him, and he gassed me up like nobody's business, made me feel so beautiful, so perfect, and then was single-handedly the person to take that all away and then more. And I feel like I hear that a lot, where it's like I didn't feel worthy, he made me feel so great, but then also, was the person that is making this person not want to be alive anymore. And it's like that is so bizarre that it's so polar opposite from start to beginning, start to end.
yeah, I think, they build you up, build you up, build you up just so they can kick your legs out from under you. Um, there are, scenes on TV where we see people who are looking particularly kind of inflated, and then their abusive spouse over time just chips away. And that's really disturbing. And it's no different for any of my clients. There's this kind of buildup, like, you are my soulmate, you are the most amazing lover, friend, all the things, crying. I often think that Hollywood is filled with narcissists because they are such good actors, right? So
Yes,
like,
they
I mean,
are.
this is like the level where, it's like, bravo, encore, let's see. It's just this, and then sort of turn it off and, wipe the fake tears away and carry on. But they will go really hard. This is somebody who will donate, a kidney to you on a Monday and then, tell you to get the fuck out of the house on a Tuesday. They will go all the way with this love bombing just to turn around and watch you be shocked by, like, you donated a kidney to me yesterday. What do you mean?
Right.
I'm like, this sort of mind fuckery is for sport, and that's the level. So you're talking about crazy highs and crazy lows. I mean, and that's why people really decompensate. It's really hard for them to process, let alone describe it to someone else, because it sounds insane. Like, even as I'm saying
Right.
it, it sounds crazy. It's not, though. This is real.
Yeah, it's so hard to describe it. I find, I think that my story of the podcast is like 20 something episodes, and they're right around like an hour and a half to 2 hours long each. Like it took me that long to tell my part, which was only like a year, and well, it was probably 2 years. I'm like, really? Like, but I didn't leave any detail out, and I knew that part of me needed to share all of like the shame I had inside from all of like the embarrassing things that I hid from everyone. And I was like, if I don't like stop being so picture perfect, social media highlight reel, like I'm never going to heal, and I have to say and to the world that I'm human and I made mistakes. And that really like let me out of this whole space of shame and like keeping things from everyone, including my family. That's so difficult, the alienation that happens because of the shame.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you keep going back and your parents are like, well, why, please stop going back. And you're like, no, just trust them. And then you manipulate your parents into liking them again, like that whole thing. That's just wild. So you mentioned a client. I want to talk about like, do you see um a lot of diagnosed narcissists or people who are antisocial? Is Are those two the same thing, I guess, too? Let's clarify that.
So, sort of oversimplify, the narcissist is indifferent to your pain, the sociopath enjoys your pain.
Okay.
And there are often overlaps. So, the narcissist steps over the dead body, the sociopath put the dead body there,
Okay.
just to
That's
sort
it.
of oversimplify. The I see narcissists in my practice. They come in for a variety of different reasons. One, they're either mandated, so they have to come in. So there are, maybe they're avoiding jail, etc. Or they are trying to hoover someone back into their life through, this love affair that has gone wrong. And they're saying, look, I'm in therapy. Um, or they are the victim of a narcissistic ex. So the covert narcissist will sometimes portray themselves as being victimized by somebody. So that's where I see them. I have a lot of daughters of narcissistic mothers. So it's not to say that all of the narcissists in the world are men. That is not accurate. I see a lot of women that struggle with the narcissistic mother. This is somebody who was, let's say, like the pageant mom or the cheerleading mom, and they sort of craft this mini me. And, they only celebrate the child when the child is an extension of them. Like, see, my daughter goes to NYU, and that's because of me. And sort of only celebrates the good and isn't really accepting and loving towards this person, just that they are someone they can brag about. So we do see that. But generally, I would say mostly if they're mandated or if they're trying to pull a romantic partner back in.
Okay. I've been going to the same I think she's actually she she's a licensed social worker. Yeah, for like it's gonna be 12 years that I've been seeing her. I was like her number four patient, so she's seen me through all of it, the good, bad, all two marriages, all of that kind of stuff. And she was telling me, she's like, I don't know if I've, and we live in a small town, but she's like, I don't know if I've ever had anybody in my chair that I could definitely for sure say that is someone with narcissistic personality disorder. She's like, it's kind of rare, but maybe it's rare because they'll never go and get diagnosed. Do you think that that's accurate? Or
It's
that there
very,
really is like a lot less of
yeah,
that than there is other?
it's very, very, very rare. Um, I sometimes see couple clients come in, and the wife will say, my husband is a narcissist. So sometimes they come into couples counseling. They probably come into couples counseling more than anywhere because they're getting sort of yanked in. But it is rare. And moreover, it's not that they don't find themselves in front of therapists. It's that when they do, they're still not doing the work. They're not insightful. They never show up to a therapy appointment and go, how do I get better? Um, and if they do, it's like this very surface thing where they're like, how do I get better? Because I can't deal with that fucking bitch. And you're like, whoa, take it easy.
Yeah.
Like,
You're
they
like,
sort of
oh,
reveal
okay.
themselves quickly.
Yeah.
There it is. But yeah, sometimes they do sort of show up and try for like a second, and then, I kind of get right into it. But it is very rare. And that's why there's very little data on their being able to change. It's because they don't really find themselves in those environments to change.
It's one of the craziest things when you really think about how consistent across the board all of like their actions are from individual to individual. And then as far as like the data that I'm aware, right, it's like not something that is passed down genetically, or like this is not um a nature thing. This is a nurture thing, correct?
Well, I would posit that I think it actually is more biological than people ever realized. It is a theory I have. It is my own theory. I don't have any data to support it whatsoever on the planet. So don't quote me, because it's just a theory that I have. I think that because I see so many people with this lineage of, the narcissistic grandfather, narcissistic father, and it kind of seems to go down the line. it really makes me pause. And so I don't know, but I do think there is a predisposition because of a biological component. And it's, again, it's just my own theory.
Yeah, I've theorized about that as well. And I'm not, I mean, I have a law degree and I have an undergrad for in hospitality. So I'm not, anybody as far as like psychology, mental health, but it seems to be that a lot of the narcissists or sociopaths that I have heard stories about people's ex-husbands' parents that they come from a line of individuals that have some sort of um, pretty like serious mental health issues, whether that's like a bipolar one or schizophrenia too. That is one where there's been parents, schizophrenic parents. Um, very, very severe, in bed debilitating depression, things that are like on super, super ends of the spectrum, not like minuscule, not like bouts of depression or anxiety. But so I have thought about that too, because I haven't, not yet, have I heard a story from someone who had like amazingly mentally well parents who ended up being, the online habitual sex worker scammer. So yeah, like there's got to be something to that.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that does happen. We see some sort of strange scenarios where the parents are healthy and there's this sort of random event. And so I think that's what makes it confusing. There are also twin studies where one of the twins is the narcissist and one is a healthy brained
Oh my
individual.
gosh.
So
Wow.
there's so many parts to it and it's hard to really kind of nail it down. And it makes a lot of people wonder. Hopefully, they start to move forward with more studies. Maybe they'll take place in prisons or something where we can start scanning for empathy in the brain and start to learn about the neurological components. It could also be intergenerational trauma. There's now studies coming out about, trauma sort of staying in your fibers and making its way through into your children. So I guess, we'll see what happens, but hopefully there are more studies about it so we can kind of have more answers around that.
Yeah, that kind of research is stuff that I would just salivate over. Like the twin studies, I'm like, holy shit, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I, yeah, oh my gosh. Oh, I had a question and then I just lost it. Oh, I guess so, like, aside from the things that we just mentioned, what kind of would lead somebody to become this way in adulthood? And is it something that, is it like one event of trauma? Does it have to happen when you're a child? Can someone be normal through, let's say, adolescence, 18, and then all of a sudden they just turn? Or when does this start?
Again, this is my theory. I think my perspective is rather Freudian. So Freud believed that the id and the ego were kind of impressive forces that people had to sort of become civilized around and, sort of not bite others and mine and steal and all of this. And I ran a daycare for 9 years, and there were some children that were particularly gracious and careful. And then there were some children that were, no matter what you did, were just nasty. And as a clinician, we would assess for oppositional defiant disorder in youth by looking to see if they would harm animals, would they set fires. So my sense is that this is something that develops very early on. And particularly with sociopaths, they have that tendency to be harming animals and setting fires and stuff. But I think for the narcissist specifically, what they understand early on is how to manipulate. So I think it's kind of something that they practice from a very early age. And again, it works tremendously well. And they realize that at a young age, oh, this is working. I can get what I want if I do this. If I play this game, and I do this, then I get what I want. Maybe they are, fighting for resources in the family system. They want attention. Maybe they're not getting it. Maybe there's an abusive parent or an uplifting parent, and they're kind of, sort of matrixing that, trying to figure out how to land and protect themselves. But they do figure out early on, in my opinion, how to manipulate, and they carry that through their life. So I think it doesn't just appear. I think it's probably something that is more organic, but that they hone those skills as needed throughout their youth and then carry it on into their adulthood.
Yeah, and I would say, the manipulation, while it can be a negative personality trait, it also can be a very positive personality trait, like in some specific professions, right? So like if you're in sales, like if you're in 100% commission sales, which is, that's very high risk, high reward, which is, kind of the MO, like that's a good quality. So I can see maybe how this individual would be like, yeah, I'm manipulative. Yeah, I can convince, an Eskimo to buy ice, like that kind of thing. And I feel that like to my core because I'm like, wow, I just really drank the Kool-Aid like so much. It like, I wanted some part of me at that point when I met him wanted someone to tell me that God sent me to him. Like I wanted to feel that irreplaceable and that confirmed. So that's just wild. Yeah. So okay, so let's talk about like your book. Let's talk about you a little bit more. Is there anything specific that you feel about kind of like the trends in this space right now? You just mentioned kind of like theories that you have. Is there anything else that you kind of theorize about that is maybe very different from the norm?
Yeah, so that the whole book I wrote was around fusing the concepts of cult abuse and narcissistic abuse. So I'm really, really keen on people understanding mind control, specifically in terms of positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and how people will manipulate those kind of tactics to get what they want from you, which is attention and dopamine and power and control and stuff like this. So I think on a macro scale, it's important for me to create awareness around mind control specifically, so that we can begin to have conversations about people who are getting into positions of power politically that are particularly pathological and why that's a problem when somebody gets into a position of power that has no empathy. We saw this when in Nazi Germany. So I have a very macro lens that I think has served me well, not just being a clinician and doing the micro work with my clients, but the advocacy piece and how to sort of protect people in the family court system. So I have a desire ultimately for justice, right? So a lot of my clients, when they come into session, they really, really struggle with this justice piece. They feel it is unfair, it is unjust that they lose their children to somebody who potentially could be sexually abusing the children, that they lose their case, that they end up getting sentenced to time, and because the narcissist is adept at manipulating the courts. And so that macro lens and the cult abuse fusing into narcissistic abuse is really, really important to me because I think we need to do a better job developing legislation that protects victims. So not just, identifying it, but really like taking it to the next level. How do we make it stop? How do we course correct this? Because this idea of just, get away from the narcissist, go no contact. Yeah, that's great for you. What's going to happen to the next bitch? Like she's screwed,
Mhm.
and a lot of people do that and they should. You have to protect yourself and they pray, please find a new victim because get out of my hair. And I get it. But now here comes that cycle again. And this next person, that's somebody's daughter. That's somebody's sister, that's somebody's mom, that's somebody's best friend. And so we have to kind of now level up and manage how to maybe lock arms and get into class action lawsuits with the other exes. The only time I've ever seen justice happen is in the cult environment because the cult members outnumber the leader. So we saw this in the Nexium cult where Keith Raniere was taken down because they went after him. And we saw this in the Stolen Youth cult because Larry was taken down because they went after him. And so if one woman speaks, nobody cares. It's a sad truth reality. We need to kind of start to make collectives and little pods of people that begin to speak the truth around abusers and see if then we can get some momentum and get justice for people, so we can begin to trend towards, that justice piece, which I think is really at the core of the pain and trauma for most of the people who go through this.
I agree wholeheartedly and feel exactly the same way. Um, Two things that you said that I want to touch on. His first victim, his first wife, he has a child with, and I remember I'm very good friends with her. And I remember her telling me initially last summer, I just wanted so badly for him to find another girlfriend because whenever whenever he would be single or like freshly in a relationship was when he would start pretending that he wanted to be a dad again because he had relinquished his rights of his child. And so he would always, in an attempt to make the current new victim think that he's a good dad and that he was victimized and coerced into giving up his rights. He would say, "We're going to go to court." Hey, like for me, it was, "You went to law school, so you can help me get my daughter back. She was taken from me against my will." Lo and behold, I have an email that says, "Hey, I don't love you. I never connected with a child. I don't want my rights." Like, that's insanity, but he uses his daughter that he doesn't see as this hook for everybody else. And hey, it's a good play because it gets him all of the women that were also similar. It's crazy, like even like looks wise very similar, but definitely in personality, heart, and empathy. The second part that you said was, I mean, just overall about legislation, that obviously is something that is so deeply rooted in who I am. I think that I am so just and ethical, like to a detriment. Like it's hard. I can't lie, so it sucks. It was difficult for me during the divorce trial because I had I mean, I had to, I'm filing bankruptcy still, right? I literally had to represent myself. And it ended, the outcome ended up horribly, that I had to pay for his attorney, or I'm ordered to pay for his attorney to divorce me after he did all of the damage. Um, so because I knew that, evidence wise, everything that I had showed me sending him money or me doing things. The coercion is the part that it's like, how do we put that on paper? Or how do we make that real? Because I have 16 victims and I'm like, we need to do something. We need to do it. Because the power, like you said, the power is in numbers. And it wasn't like I'm not a vengeful person. He's a felon. He'll end up in jail again. But it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I didn't get justice in the family court. Thankfully, we don't have any children, and I kind of moved past that. But I knew that if I told the story, that more people would come out of the woodwork, and then perhaps the justice would either be on, justice by media, trial by media, or eventually this could help somebody turn this into some sort of legislation, lobbying, those kind of things.
So I think what it's trending toward, which we're seeing, is the coercive control laws are coming out, certainly in New Jersey where I am and other places. And so it seems to be trending towards at least having some way to go after them, especially in a divorce scenario like yours. But it's so slow moving, and I think what we need to do is not be afraid to reach out to the exes and to the new supply, even if we get rejected, right? So let's say the new supply tells you, "I know my man, I'm good." See, like, this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
That's okay. You did what your due diligence was. Maybe there was a seed planted, but this idea that we're going to heal in a vacuum and not do anything is only perpetuating damage that's done by the narcissist moving forward. And that means moving forward in not just that relationship, but holistically, like our daughters are going to suffer at the hands of. So we need to think a little more globally, a little more holistically. Who are we really protecting? It's not just the new supply. It's your neighbor's daughter. it's your niece, it's everybody who could potentially be victimized everywhere, because we need to start sort of sounding off about what this is. And as I mentioned, locking arms and trying to create a movement of sorts, because I do see cults having success in justice, and I'm pretty well convinced it's because of the numbers.
Absolutely. And hey, if you put it out there and you send the "Hey girl" warning you DM, maybe she's not ready now, but she'll save it because maybe in 10 months she'll be ready and then you're there. So, I know you have a hard
That's
stop.
right.
I want to thank you so much for being here, answering all my questions and providing us with your expertise and your theories. And hey, if there's any way that I can help you in any sort of legislation, let me know. I have all of the data and all of the women who are ready to go.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Beauty. That was really awesome. And thank you for sharing your story. I'm going to now dig into you. I'm going to do a deep dive because I'm super curious. Have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
It's not over yet till you taste regret. It's not over